Hey everybody, this is our fourth episode of Stark Contrast, and today we're talking about the Fear Street trilogy, as well as James Gunn's Suicide Squad. I'm
The
here with
Suicide Squad. It's very important.
that is very important because Suicide Squad is not a good movie, and also not what we're talking about. Um, and Nick is also here with Brianna.
Hello.
I interrupted you saying your name. Malik is also here. He's the one who's been talking.
But yeah, I am very excited about both of these topics. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. Fear Street trilogy. Who wants to go first?
I don't know. I guess I'll open up because why Brandon, do you remember why we decided to watch this? Because I
Why
feel
we
like
decided to watch Fear Street because I have an obsession with horror movies during the summer, and I was making you watch everything horror, and that just popped up on the Netflix recommended, and I was like, we're watching it.
yeah.
That's pretty much how that happened.
Yes. And I didn't find out until we were already partway through that this was based on an R.L. Stine thing.
Was it? Oh wait, yeah, that's right. We talked about that. It was.
Yeah, and so I'm used to, as I imagine most people who are familiar with R.L. Stine, him doing much more kid-friendly, sort of like gateway, entryways horror stuff. And yeah, given that, this is pretty intense, but it does also feel like him in the way that it's also got that kind of fun aspect to it, and I don't know, it's something that I started out not loving because I have, and both of you already know this, I have this thing with especially modern horror where I feel like it doesn't have the most likable characters, so it's difficult for me to get invested, and then when people start dying, I'm just kind of like whatever. And the story of these movies starts in that place, but then it becomes really interestingly about getting these characters to become more empathetic and getting you to care more about them. And I think they did a pretty good job. So by the time we were partway through, I was like, wow, I'm really invested in this.
I think because when we first watched it, we didn't realize that this was something that was going to function in three parts. And so you had a really big problem with the cast of characters not really being friends with each other in the first movie. That I think, well,
Well, see, no,
a lot of the
because
people in the first movie wound up dying anyway, so that's fine. They didn't have to be friends, even though it would have, I suppose, benefited the story, but made less sense with what goes on in Shady Side. Shady Vale,
I think
Sunnyvale,
did.
Shady Side. There it is.
Yeah, there we go.
Um,
Someone's stealing something from Buffy.
Eh,
ha.
eh.
But yeah, that I find that like as the movies go on, the cast of characters that we do gets closer knit and becomes more friendly with each other, which helped you care about them a little bit more. But in the first movie, everyone was just kind of an asshole for, as far as we knew at the time, no good reason. They just were.
Yeah, I mean, it was comparatively early into it's 94, yeah, 1994,
Yes.
where you were like, yeah, we have this pre-established context of like this whole place is cursed, horrible stuff is happening in this town all the time. There's pretty much all the reason in the world for everyone here to be kind of terrible. And I definitely knew that this was going to be three parts going in. I think what surprised me was the fact that the 1994 part was going to be the framing device for the other two parts. Like, I wasn't expecting
We
that.
went back.
Yeah, I was expecting the 1994 story to finish and then be done, and then the next two would be their own things. But it's, I guess, to plot summarize for anyone who's unfamiliar, we have this group of characters in 1994. That's the first one. Uh, Dina and Sam, who's like her estranged sort of ex-girlfriend. They were in a relationship.
Yeah, no, they're
before.
definitely exes.
Okay, yeah, so they're
They
exes.
were in a relationship and broke up off screen, and the
Mhm.
first time we see them together is Gina returning Sam's stuff to her.
So
And
those
they're like writing these or attempting to write these like mean-spirited notes.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's how we open, yeah.
Yeah.
And so their relationship is really strained. Dina has her younger brother. and her friends and her younger brother is really into like researching all of the weird deaths and like mass murders that happen in their town because they're cursed. That some town resident is just going to go crazy and go on a killing spree every set number of years, and so that
Is it
happened.
20 years or something? It's like once a generation.
Yeah, so that's happened again, and so we've got this whole mystery unraveling as to why does this happen? When is the last time this happened? How can we get rid of this curse? And yeah, the whole trilogy 1994, 1978, and 1666 are all sort of framed around the 1994 stuff and trying to resolve this mystery. And
Which I guess now that if you explain it like that, it makes sense that it has to culminate in 1994, wrapping up at the end because 1666 and
78.
78, they're in the past.
Yeah.
They're already finished. Like you can't resolve those. They're done.
Yeah, again, like that's not knowing that premise. I was expecting just 1994 beginning end, 1978 beginning end, and then
Yeah.
1666 beginning end. But overall, like reservations that I had at the start aside, I really think it's a compelling trilogy of movies. We'll get into which movies I preferred to other ones, and if you guys have those same preferences. But I'm not sure, Malik, how much more you knew about the story here going into the movies than I did. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So I saw the trailers, and I was like, "This is brilliant," because the doing like a whole trilogy of horror films, but like at a weekly release, like and building up the anticipation, and like I assumed they would do like a cliffhanger ending for each one, which they more or less did, and that was pretty exciting. So yeah, all I knew was that they were doing a horror trilogy, whatever the trailer showed, and the fact that hold on, let me look up her name because people have those. Well, yeah, Sadie Sink, who was very well known for her role in Stranger Things. I really like her in that show, and there's also hold
Wait a
on, let me
second.
see.
Is that's Max, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it took me a second. That's the redhead.
That's her.
Oh, yeah.
And there's also the girl who voices why am I blanking on her name? Adam Eve in Invincible. She plays the adult version of her.
Yeah, that's Jillian Jacobs is her name, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we primarily know her as Britta from Community.
Oh, Britta, yeah.
Which
So those are the only two actors that I knew going in, and Leah I can't pronounce her name, but the director of this movie, I only know her from the few episodes that she directed in MTV's TV show version of Scream,
which makes a lot of sense because
yeah,
Brianna also adores that show.
I do. It's true.
and I could very much feel her sensibilities throughout the first movie, especially.
Absolutely.
I do think her sensibilities creep in too much with the third movie, and that's the movie I like the least, but we'll talk about that. Overall, I thought this was, like you guys said, a really compelling and fun trilogy. Despite how graphic it can be, I would use this trilogy to try to introduce someone into horror if they're not not acclimated or don't really watch a lot of horror movies.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the callbacks to the classic stuff like Scream and Friday the 13th. And the third movie is trying to ape, I guess, The Witch that starred
Yes, that's the exact thought that I had. Yes.
I don't think
I feel like in the back of my mind I was thinking that.
Anya Taylor-Joy film, yeah.
Yeah, like because I can think of a couple of movies that have that aesthetic, but the Witcher the Vavitch, as I like
The
to,
Vavitch.
is probably the one that would be most on people's minds. Yeah.
At the very
But
least, they set it up exactly the same. Like the way the camera pans in on people, the way we get like POV shots, exactly the same.
Mm.
so I guess we'll just break it down movie by movie and go through the story. So, um,
Yeah.
another thing. Oh,
I
go ahead,
was
Nick.
I was just gonna say, you mentioned that the third one was your least favorite, and I don't know if we want to like do these in
Oh,
We don't necessarily have to do the order.
yeah, because I also of the three would probably say I dug the third one the least,
same.
and yeah, that seems to be the unanimous
Oh,
opinion.
I'm not gonna lie. The plot twist of like the person being the like her friend or whatever, I was like, okay, I called that, but not immediately, so I'm into it.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to say why for reasons that I don't think are really shallow, because if I think as to why I didn't love that one as much, my main thought is just that like I don't really love that time period as a setting.
Me neither.
I
That's why I
don't.
didn't enjoy the Witch that much, even though it's apparently a really great movie. I was just kind of the whole way through.
Yeah, I really think that's the main thing, is that there's, I don't know what it's like, a disconnect. Like I can't relate to those people, but like I liked the idea of recasting everybody, so all of the actors come back in different roles.
I
But
was very much conflicted on that because I
okay,
didn't think a lot of them could pull off the actual dialect of that time period.
They could not.
yeah,
They
that's
could
that's
not.
part of the issue. Also, I think probably
Yeah, that was a strange choice to me.
I get it. Like, if we imagine for a minute that these were actors who could do that, or maybe the direction was better, I don't know where the root of the issue lies. But like, if we imagine that that aspect is not a problem, I think it works just on like a cool little symbolic level, because it's like this is where all the problems start. We're with 1666. We're beginning this cycle where basically the same scenario repeats forever and ever, and in a way these same like quote unquote people who went through this are the people who have to be there for the resolution. Like there's a reason that we cast Dina as
Sarah.
yeah, it's like
I
that.
think the main reason for that is because it mirrors her relationship with Sam
Yeah,
and the fact that they're both lesbians and
Lesbian.
Seraphia got hanged for being a lesbian.
yeah,
I actually like the fact that we get so I have this thing where like whenever there's a witch in a show or like people are going like, oh, they're a witch, da, 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 whatever, I'm just like, oh, okay, there's an evil witch. Like I do not question that. No part of my head is like, maybe the witch isn't the problem here. I like that that's the direction they went with in this. Like it's really not Sarah Fierce's fault. That's just kind of a like a
That's
misdirect.
the narrative that everyone decided to go with.
Yeah, like it's like playing telephone across generations. Like you just kind of get the distorted version of the truth and you run with it, which is what I usually do in a movie anyway. I just kind of take whatever setting they establish and I run with it. I leave it at face value because it's the setting or it's the central plot. Usually that doesn't switch itself around too much. But I like that Sarah wasn't actually the villain here. That was fun for me.
Yeah, that was a really fun twist. I dug that a lot.
yeah, and
But
I think. Oh, Sid, you continue.
I was just gonna say my main issues with this third film is that not only can they not pull off, or at least the majority of them not pull off the dialect of that time period, I think it screws with the pacing because we don't actually get enough done. And at least this is my feeling upon first watching it. I don't feel like we got enough done, and I feel like a lot of it was really meandering, and it didn't need to be as long as it was. I feel like they were trying to justify calling it 1666 by having the majority of the movie take place in that time period when it really didn't need to. I feel like we could have,
not a movie.
yeah, I feel like we could have told her story in the first 30 minutes of the movie, if that.
Yeah, it really feels like you said, they wanted to justify the title. They didn't want it to literally be like on your Netflix screen. You see 1994, and then 1978, and then 1994 Part 2, even though that would debatably be like the more flowing narrative, because that
Yeah.
might confuse people or whatever. I can't help but
A
think
lot
like,
of what we're looking at in that time period feels like fluff.
yeah,
And
I can't help but feel like if this were like a TV series, then the 1666 part could be like a 30-minute episode of television, as opposed to how long was it, like
I
50
didn't clock it,
minutes
but
to
it
an
felt like
hour?
at least like an hour worth of time we spent there.
Yeah, I was gonna say like 50 minutes to an hour of this movie. Yeah, that might be it. It didn't occur to me that that might be the problem, but that might be the issue also, is that not enough happens, or not enough feels like it's happening in the 1666 part to justify sort of like killing the momentum of the
Yeah.
1994 stuff to spend so much time on it.
And then we have, and this goes back to me feeling like the director's sensibilities creep in too much. We have a scene of all the young teenagers like getting high and dancing around in the woods, which would not be happening in that time period.
Um,
It just
I mean,
wouldn't.
It wouldn't be happening at the very least in a co-ed sense. Women
Yeah,
might
yeah,
have
yeah,
done
yeah,
that
yeah.
with other women. Men might have done that with other men, but women and men kind of fucking
Yeah, that
around,
that
sorry,
definitely.
getting like taking drugs and
Oh no,
whatever. No.
we're on his channel now, so you don't have to worry about censoring yourself.
Oh, thank God. Okay. No, because every time I do this, I have to like keep it PG. And well, listen, y'all, I am PG. I will curse.
These movies aren't either, so that's good.
Right. Like it's if anyone's ever seen oh my God. I
But
actually
thanks to
forget.
YouTube's weird like rules now, like all my
Yeah.
videos are not for kids, at least by their standards anyway.
Okay. There I really want to look this up. It's a movie on Netflix. It's about these women in like I want to say like 1400s like Spain or something, and they get taken in by one of the officials for being like accused of witchcraft and whatever. And in that movie, they have this thing where they go out into the woods during the day to hang out with each other, and they bring their flasks of wine and they eat these mushrooms that get them absolutely insanely high, which if you think about it back then, I mean, we have this thing about drugs now, but drugs weren't even like that back then. You didn't even really know what drugs were. You just kind of took these things that made you feel cool as a recreational activity with your friends. So the way that they do it in 1666 would have been literally impossible. They're Puritans, they would have all immediately just yeeted themselves to hell. So that could never happen. But
Is it
like
Coven?
maybe I need to look it up. It's yeah, women among women, sure. Men among men, sure. But the way they do it in 1666, no way.
Yeah, that was very inaccurate to the time period.
It was very much like a teen party kind of vibe. Which
Yeah,
was
I feel like
not the move.
they were trying a bit too hard to make it relatable. So like, this is something that you can recognize.
And it was like this well-known secret in the town.
I get the impulse to do that because again, like modern teenagers are presumably the target audience. You don't want them to feel like too alienated from the setting, but also that again is part of the issue of like, all right, this is really only half a movie. Either make it shorter so you don't do that scene, or make it longer so you can justify having something like that in there. Because otherwise, I don't know that we need to be too attached to anyone other than Sarah and her girlfriend.
Yeah, that's really all you need. Because that's what gets her hanged, is they think she's impure because she's a lesbian and she has feelings for that other female in that time period. And so they hunt her down and they hang her. That doesn't sound like an hour worth of story.
Yeah. And like there are bits in there that I understand wanting to make into a story, like seeing the plagues happen, there's like seeing all the cattle die and stuff, and like you want to see the escalation.
It's Coven of Sisters.
Like you want to see the escalation, you want to on some level understand why everyone would be like, nope, this girl's got to get hanged. But at the same time, it's the 1600s. Like they would hang people over anything at the time, so I don't even need that much justification. And it's just now I'm thinking also about once we do cut back to 94 and we get to the second half of that movie, there's stuff that should have been given more time that I feel like we didn't do because we spent so much time on the 1666 stuff. Like the setup and payoff from part one of that guy who's in jail and he's always getting locked up all the time, and he gives Dina's brother like his card and they bring him in to like be part of the gang at the end. It's like, okay, I guess it's cool that this guy's here and we set that up in the first movie, but could have used a couple of more scenes to really make him feel like a character. And instead, he's just kind of here hanging out. Like, what is happening? He's like the one guy who's off to the side. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what all the backstory is here. You guys seem the black guy.
Oh, yeah, he was funny, but
He
like
was
we
funny.
really did not need him.
It feels weird that he's there just kind of to be like the hanger on, and it's like we need an extra man to help us out here.
No, he legitimately is the comic relief. Like everyone else is kind of really too entangled in the plot at that point to be making proper jokes.
We get the bit where it's either Dina or Jillian Jacobs, who's got like this big dramatic moment, and he's just off to the side, like, hey.
He spends a lot of his time in this movie going, please do not make me do what you're going to make me do, and then looking around and going, who are you? Why are you here? What are you? I would like to leave now.
Yeah. It really didn't occur to me until Malik said it, but I think you hit the nail on the head where it's just a lot of decisions with 1666 feel like they're there to justify the naming convention. And I would have done things differently for the sake of having things flow smoother.
I would have just given the last movie a name that didn't have a year in it, to be honest with you, if I didn't want to do 1994 Part 2.
Yeah.
Because it's really, like, they made it about 1666, but really it's not about 1666. I guess, if you really wanted to try and justify it, it could be because we finally find out the truth. Like, the first two movies are really kind of the characters trying to figure out what's going on, and you don't get the crux of the problem until 1666. Like, you cannot understand the context of the future / present day narrative without the details of 1666, but they gave us more than we needed.
Yeah, it feels like it's a weird double-edged sword, because on the one hand, and again, I'm being kind of glib. I know this isn't how movies get written, or like even adaptations of books.
Oh my God.
But on one hand, it feels like they shoehorned in a bunch of 1666 stuff to justify naming the movie 1666, and then conversely, it feels like we as viewers are like, well, why is this named 1666? Because it's not enough about that. That's not enough of a story still. So it's
I
kind
would have
of
just named it Sarah Fear.
I just named it Fear Street Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. Why not?
I would have named it Fear Street, except I would have changed the spelling of fear to Sarah's last name, Fear. There it is.
But yes, I don't know. We talked a lot about our sort of reservations with Part 3. I am torn on which I prefer between 94 and 78. I'm leaning towards 78, and I can't really articulate why.
I like 94 a lot. 94 was a good time. 94 was a ride. Like, that movie.
It really was.
Blast.
Yeah,
That
especially
was a fun watch.
1994 has the thing that some movies have where it really picked up in the third act.
Mm-hmm.
Like, once we get to everyone sort of on the same page and they're trying to fix the problem, then it's like, oh man, this is really tense and there's a lot going on.
And also really... 94 has that thing where like all of the killers are running around and they wind up having to explode them in the school bathroom. And they have that in 78 too, but I think it's only like 2 of them or something.
Yeah, because I was trying to remember. I couldn't recall.
No, that's a lie. At the end of 78, at the very end, when she's stuck under that tree, I feel like there are a bunch of them out and about trying to get to her.
I couldn't recall if we had one killer consistently throughout 1994, and then the others came in 1994 Part 2. But no, you're right. By the end of the first movie, we have
all of them. They're
all
in
of
the
them.
grocery store. They're stuck. They wind up doing that thing with like mopping the blood around or like switching shirts or whatever the hell it was
Yeah.
they did.
That's like we got
They have
characters.
to. They split off into teams, Scooby-Doo style. Like I'm telling you, man, 94 is like the way for me.
That
I
did
like-
feel very Scooby-Doo. And like I want it kind of felt like the Scooby-Doo movie I always want, but like no we'll never get to like an R-rated Scooby-Doo with actual blood and mayhem and some massacres. Like I know no one will ever make that, at least no official studio will ever make that movie, but I want it so badly.
Because
And,
instead we get things like Scoob, and it's like, why are you doing me like this? Why?
Scoob,
Like when you know there's so many,
discussion.
like it's our generation that grew up with Scooby, and I don't feel like Hollywood tries to make that happen so much where like they'll do like an origin-y thing for adults. I mean,
Yeah.
well, like for kids, but adults grew up with the property.
Yeah, it's like they're still pandering to children. It's like, hello, we're right here. We have money. We're the adults now. We'll
Well,
throw
I mean-
it at you. Just give us a reason.
Well, guys, we're going to talk about James Gunn later. His first draft of the Scooby-Doo movie was R-rated. Let's just ask him to make one.
Yo, James.
Oh God, whoever have the rights. I mean, if it's Warner Brothers, they'll give them the rights and they'll do it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we got to look up who actually has the rights to Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, Warner Brothers is. Scooby-Doo is a Warner Brothers thing. They got.
Out of every
Hanna-Barbera
out of
stuff.
every kids franchise, I guess they really try hard to keep Scooby in particular extremely PG. Maybe a hard PG-13 if you get to like the live action movies, but like no further than that. And it's like, what? Why?
Yeah, you know,
we have Riverdale. We have a whole Riverdale.
I
why-
feel like we could never get a Scooby-Doo movie that has like Fear Street levels of violence. I think we could maybe get a Scooby-Doo movie one day that has like the vibe.
I
of
would
one of
like
these things.
Scooby-Doo to have a murder mystery. Murder. Emphasis on the murder. Because
We have to see murder happen.
no, because we get all these like missing people, these people turn to stone, yada yada, and at the end of the day, it's all a hoax, it's all a game. They turn up just fine.
They get
I
their
want a
souls stolen and then
murder.
they're fine still.
Right. How are you gonna do that in the whole and we watched someone talk about how the live action Scooby-Doo movies are out of order, specifically because Velma has an existential crisis in
That's
the first one that or in the second one that, oh my god, the monsters are real. And it's like, you just did this the last movie.
That's the Nerd Sync video plug for Nerd Sync.
Yes.
But I'm the reason that I am kind of leaning towards 78. I think it's twofold. On one hand, again, it took me a minute to like start vibing with 94, and then once I was into it, I was like into it.
That's what I have with 78. I could not get myself into that headspace.
Once we start 78, I'm already like, okay, this is just an extension of that same story. I'm already in, so I like stay in. And also, I don't know, I think it benefits from the setup of the camp and having a bigger cast of characters and having, again, like a camp is not like an enclosed space, but it's a more like set, like closed off location than a whole town is.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of adds to the tension. There's something to like the
'Cause
geography
you
of
can't
everything.
leave that place. You have to leave on the camp bus. The bus is gone. The drivers aren't here.
And we have like a better sense with the camp than we do of the town, of like where everything is, where everyone is going, and what that means.
Yeah.
And I think it's just set up more cleanly, I'll say.
I think in the sense of details, I agree with you on that. I have to say I still prefer 94, if only because in 78, I really did not like any of the characters in that movie. Like, I remember watching 78
That's
with
fair.
you and going, what is her name? The Britta.
Sadie, the main character.
I
Yeah.
was like, God, she's
really mean.
person. She is the most vile child. Oh, I could not deal with her.
I didn't react quite that badly.
She is so damn mean. And I
She's really
could not get past it. And like everyone in that movie is kind of either really antagonistic, like take that camp counselor that like starts organizing the flag
Yeah.
thing, and he's like, Sunnyvale is always gonna win, Shady Siders don't get anything yet. I'm like, bro, this is summer camp. The
Like-
other hippie girl is constantly high, is just kind of not here for anything. She's like, whatever,
I thought she
I'm
was
gonna
funny.
go have sex later. She's a vibe, all right? She's a mood. But that doesn't mean I like her. Like in 78, I just could not find anyone to attach to except for Nick. And then we find out what the deal with him is. So either I have really bad taste, or he happened to at the time be the lesser of several other evils.
Well, I mean,
He was, and I really actually liked that. I like that he, like, you know, was chipping her walls and like made her less of a mean person.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turned out he was the ultimate mean person.
And that's
yeah, but like just in the context of 1978, I do have a similar thing to Brianna where I'm like, I'm not really attaching to anyone because everyone is like, and the movie in general feels really mean spirited.
Yeah.
And like, no one.
Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying with that.
In 94, it feels like you're looking at a group of people who have been beaten down by a system. In 78, you're looking at the people who are perpetuating that system. And I cannot.
Very true. That. And there is something to that, and they're doing something with that in terms of story, especially with Sadie and her sister, because like towards the end with their whole reconciliation, it's like they both have their own ways of dealing with their situation, both of which aren't particularly healthy, but they understand that and reconcile that towards the end, which is what that whole thing was about. It just wasn't particularly engaging or fun to watch them just be mean. Well, to watch her sister be kind of a control freak and just watch her be really mean and angry and pissed off at the world. Like,
that reconciliation didn't feel, by the time we got to it, in my own personal opinion, it
didn't even really feel earned.
Yeah, no, it didn't, because it just happened because one of them almost died, and they were like, all right, well, we fight all the time, whatever. We're not going to fix any of that, but, like, I don't want to lose you, so let's just agree to disagree on this. And it felt very shallow. Like, they didn't actually talk out any of their problems. They just mutually agreed to put them aside because of the present danger. And, like, things like that, if that's how you resolve your argument, you really haven't resolved it. It's just going to pop back up later. That is true. A resolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like none of what you guys are saying is incorrect, but I did sort of I took it differently, where I had the thing of we are spending a lot of time in 1978 with the perpetuators of the system, with the Sunnyvale guys, but none of those guys are supposed to be the characters that we're invested in, so I don't really think of it as like we're giving the perpetuators like undue focus. Like we're supposed to care about, I think, like 4 people in the context of 1978, and that's Cindy, Ziggy is the one played by Max from Stranger Things, and Nick and Cindy's friend, like the one that she's having a lot of interpersonal issues with, like her
the stoner.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like those 4 are like the people we're supposed to care about, and I do get the sense that they're all people who have been beat down by this system, except for Nick because he's like from Sunnyvale. But I get the sense that those are guys who have a long history before this camp of just constantly being shit on. Cindy's whole thing is
they do make allusions to it, so that's true.
Like her whole thing, the reason she's such a control freak and she worries so much about like her perception is that she wants to eventually be able to get out, and like that's only going to happen if she maintains like a certain image. And I feel like when we get to the point in the story where it's like, okay, let's put these issues aside so we can deal with them later, that then is supposed to be the tragedy of like, oh, well, you're never going to get the chance to deal with them later because 2 out of 3 were going to be dead.
I think because I don't really connect with these characters, I interact with them all equally. So I don't have that, but I agree with the points that you're making. I still find that, for me, I think they should have resolved that on screen, but it does make for a decent tragedy.
Yeah. Like I really like that bit where I wish I could remember the friend's name, but she has this whole speech about like how I just realized that this curse is real. My entire life has been a shit show, and I can
Alice?
Alice? Yes, I think that sounds right.
I think so.
But she's like, my entire life has been a shit show, and it's the reason I'm such a terrible person, and I finally get the chance to confront the thing responsible. I am going to do this. And then she gets sliced with an axe immediately afterward, and I'm just
Shouldn't have started talking.
shouldn't have stopped talking. As soon as you stop talking, that axe is coming for you.
You also shouldn't have left the axe right next to the dead guy.
Yeah, someone. Why didn't they pick
Honestly.
up the axe?
It's 78. Y'all got horror movies. You should know better.
But yeah, no. Like the more you guys talk about it, I totally understand. Like having those issues with 78, but in the experience of watching it, I kind of vibed with what it was doing. Like the mean spiritedness of it felt very intentional, and I could kind of get into it given what was going on. Like that bit with the one nerd kid.
Oh, he was so sweet.
He was so sweet, and then he just gets killed.
Murked because he's from Shadyside. That's just
Yeah.
what happens to kids from Shadyside. They wind up dying because Shadyside is cursed.
I adore that.
Yeah, actually, I do
Horror
too.
movies like rarely have the balls to kill kids on screen. As that always
Especially
impresses
not the
me.
kids who haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah, but that's
Poor
the
innocent little Timmy just standing
no
by
one's-
himself.
Like he got ditched by everyone who he was supposed to be like keeping prisoner, and then someone who he thinks is one of his counselors shows up. It's like, oh hey, what's going on? Stab.
I was surprised by how menacing they were able to make him without the mask. Like for the majority of that film, he doesn't have the iconic Jason-esque mask.
Yeah, and I think that was a really smart move. Also, just conceptually, is that all of these serial killers have a very iconic look to them, so you can get that sense of like, oh man, we've got like a lot of iconic killers here, but none of them are like characters that exist outside of these movies.
Yeah.
So you have that effect of like, oh man, it's like a Jason, Freddy, Michael thing, but it's none of those guys. It's completely original characters.
Mm-hmm.
We got to talk about the ending because I thought it was absolutely hysterical. Me and my friend were crying laughing so hard. So when the two sisters are trying to bury
the ending of 78, you mean?
Yeah, when they're trying to bury the hand, they're trying to find the body. Yeah, they're trying to find the body, right, to reunite it with the hand.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it was moved, so they can't find it. All the killers show up, and the axe murderer just goes to town, like gives her like a good 50, 70 strikes with that axe. I'm like, she's dead. Stop.
Right. But then Siggy's just fine. Well, she's not fine, but she's still alive somehow.
Like, after he gave her some CPR, she's totally fine from getting stabbed in the kidney like 4 times.
No, really though. Okay, so no, I have the thing.
But that whole thing retroactively makes sense because he was involved in the whole actual curse thing. So I got the impression that he actually magicked her back to life, and it wasn't just CPR.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, actually, me neither. That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool.
But you were saying something
No,
about...
yeah, I have the thing with this that you have with Lovecraft Country. Yeah, where I feel like this whole movie is rather mean-spirited in the way that it treats even the people that we're supposed to empathize with, which is the point, but also in the way that it treats just regular kids. And when we finally get something good out of it, immediately in the next movie, they roll that back. So we're like, oh, Nick is like, okay, Nick is a good guy. And then immediately in the next movie, we're like, oh, God, Nick is the worst problem. There's nothing good about him. And that just feels so like, damn, that was a cheap shot. I liked one person from that movie, and you had to make him not an antagonist, the antagonist. Really?
Yeah.
Really? Like, I think that 78 was, like, technically speaking, probably the best made one out of the bunch. It makes sense,
Hmm.
but it's so, everything about it, it's not fun. Like, it's interesting to watch and I'm really engaged and like on the edge of my seat the entire time, but it's not a fun watch. Like, I don't feel like I had fun per se when I finish that movie. I feel like, wow, I've seen a movie. Okay.
That's
I share that, and like it hooks me back in with the investment of what's going on in the present day. Well, I say present day, 1984, but you know
Yeah.
what I mean. Like, that overall investment is still there.
Yeah.
And the things that I don't like don't hurt that too much. Um, but yeah, this movie does actually have its fair share of problems as well. So I would say 1994 is probably my favorite. Well, yeah, 1994 is probably my favorite one of the trilogy.
that's fair. I will say for 1978, there's a bit that I don't know if this is true, but if it is, then I feel like kind of an idiot. Where I thought it was really clever that we had the twist of like, I spent the whole movie thinking that C. Berman, Gillian Jacobs, as an adult, is Cindy Berman, the older sister, and then we get to the end, and Nick is like, the paramedics are like, "What's her name?" And he's talking about Ziggy, and it's like Christine. So Ziggy has been C. Berman the whole time. So the sister that I thought was gonna die is the one who survived. Brianna's like, well, no, because they call Ziggy C. Berman at the beginning of the movie, and I'm like, I don't remember that happening.
Listen, either that or they said Z and I misheard it, but I heard it as C. That really mean camp Sheila, the really mean camp counselor talks about like, oh, anyone can be perfect, even you, C. Berman, and then she like Ziggy just walks off, and I was like, oh, so that's the C we're looking for. All
Yeah,
right.
I either didn't hear that or was not paying attention because I didn't get that.
Well,
Do you remember feeling any kind of way about that, Malik?
Uh, Feeling any kind of way about what exactly?
Like that bit
The
of dialogue, like was that like
if
the
you even
twist?
heard that, you might.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just insane.
Or the twist at the end, like figuring one of the two sisters was like the other one.
oh, I had a feeling. I don't know if it was that exactly, because I did see all of these movies twice. Um, but I don't. I feel like when I saw it the first time, like on first viewing, I was supposed to be confused as to, or at least not know for sure for the majority of the film, which sister actually makes it and is telling
Yeah.
the story in present day. Um, but I had a feeling it would have been Sadie, or the redheaded girl,
Yeah,
just
Zig.
because just because she looks more like the younger version of the person in present day.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah.
And she's also like, if you look at Britta, like, ain't no way that's Cindy. No way. Britta's an asshole. Like, that's definitely Ziggy.
I mean, hey, enough trauma will do that to somebody.
That's fair. That's fair.
But yeah, so I don't know if there's. Do we know if this is gonna be continued? Well, do we know anything?
So I sent you the interview with the director, and Brianna. I encourage you to check that out at some point if you get a chance.
Yeah.
She's talked about how she wants to do kind of her version of the MCU with this universe, like do like a horror movie, like multi-film universe type thing, and like branch out, tell other stories. I'd be all for that.
Same.
Me too.
Yeah, as problematic as the second and third film are, I think they're still pretty solid, and the trilogy as a whole is really fun. So I'd love to see more. Whatever they want to, whatever other R.L. Stein stuff they want to pull from, stuff from this specifically, I don't care. Like, go for it.
If it was
And
multi-universe, would it be like Slasher, where like you'll have kind of across several universes, there's just a massacre happening at equal points in time?
I would assume that it's gonna be like a kind of anthology thing where it's more vague. Like, because I don't think they're going to do what Slasher ended up doing in recasting actors again. So it'll just be like, here's a different setting with different actors, and it could be a completely different reality, or it could not. Who cares? Because, I mean, we see the guy grab the book at the end, so I'd assume that that's
Yeah.
going to be relevant
Yeah.
at some point.
And she said that Netflix is very happy with the trilogy and the results, which she's very excited about, and I'm very excited about. So I think if she wants to do more, Netflix is very inclined to let her do more.
Yeah. But in general, I really like these movies. Uh, Given the issues that we've discussed, I think those are all like true issues with the movies. But at the same time, the biggest compliment I can give it is that I'm sort of aware of all that, and especially with 1666. But it doesn't like destroy my engagement as I'm watching it, and I'm still I still care, and I'm still
Especially because
satisfied
like the
by
actual like present day conclusion
yeah.
is
By the
still
time
pretty
we get to the end of that, I'm like, yeah, that feels right.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there is still also a part where I'm like, Dina and Sam, I forget which one of them gets cut to shit, and I'm like, how are you okay by the end? But you know what?
It's Dina. Dina gets absolutely like massacred. Like this woman gets chopped up like SpongeBob, and she's just meandering, walking around, kind of telling people, "You go there, you do this," and it's like, girl, you are on death's door unless you stop the flow of blood with the force alone. Like there's no way. There's just no way.
But yes, good movie still.
Yes.
I'm glad I watched.
Okay, but can we talk about how the hand is just in the mall? I mean, that's really funny because it's the site of the first murder that we see in the scope of the first movie.
Yeah, true.
But it's just in the mall. Like, it really put into perspective how like, we knew the town was cursed, right? Like, we knew it. But that right there, that really put it into perspective. That is a human hand. They uprooted this tree. They kept the bones in the soil. They planted it right in the middle of their crappy mini mall. And, like, no one ever checked on this. Either because they didn't care enough, or, like even Ziggy, who knew it was there, just left it there. Also, does anyone know, because I'm still wondering about this, why the hell does Ziggy have 99 clocks? Why does she need to know what time it is?
I completely forgot about that, man. I don't even know.
She's got every clock, and they're all set to the exact same time. They function like normal clocks, but like, why does she have that many?
I'm guessing because she read on Reddit that it keeps the spirits away.
I'm not Reddit.
Okay, but yes. So now I am going to leave Brianna to enjoy actual air conditioning.
Wait. Before Brianna leaves,
we still talk about the first one.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about the first one.
Yeah.
And if you guys have more to say about that one, then yes.
Specifically bringing up the first one, the most creative kill I've seen in a while is
God, is it putting her through the thing? Putting her through
the deli meat cutter. Oh,
it's a bread slicer. No, that's a bread slicer. They're in the bakery section.
Slicer.
Up until the very last second, I was like, yeah, you got to get out of this. Like, there's got to be a way that you can get out of this. And then, nope.
They put it through a bread slicer. Which I didn't think, since it's made to slice bread, I didn't think
bread slicer.
Yeah, I didn't think skull and everything.
Yeah, and like you would think that a slicer designed specifically just for bread wouldn't even be sharp or strong enough to do that to a human head, but the director had them test that mechanism with a watermelon, and it destroyed the watermelon. So they're like, "Oh yeah, they could definitely take out a human head with this."
Okay.
That's wild. Why did they make it like that? It's just for bread. Oh my god.
Man. Yeah, she talks about that in the interview. When I found that out, I was like, that's insane.
That's like toasters that go up to like the 10 setting, and it's like, bro, you're taking crumbs out of your toaster at that point. There's no toast anymore. It's just burnt bread.
It's charcoal.
What? It's charcoal. Why does the toaster go up that high?
They'll find some way to use that in Final Destination 9.
Man, some people just want to eat charcoal, I guess.
Ew. All right. Well, you know what? That's not my business. It's not my fault that their breakfast sucks. Anyway, okay. So I will say about the first movie that I started off not liking a lot of the cast, but by the time we got to the end, I still didn't like them as a cast, like as a group of people. But I was so into each one of these characters as an individual. They really stepped up on that because, and I appreciate that because the whole thing about kids from this town is that they can't trust each other. They can't be friends with each other. Like it just doesn't. They're cursed in every sense, in their interpersonal relationships, in their economic endeavors, in everything that they do. They are cursed, and so of course you're gonna run into these kids who aren't actually really friends per se, but it really shows like what people can do for each other and how they can step up for each other even if they're not what you would call friends. Like it speaks to a real level of personal responsibility and empathy that you can have for other people that I like. And also each one of those characters was just really interesting and a really cool person. I was down with it.
Yeah,
Who's
her guy friend, the blonde one?
Oh my god, he's literally Ezra Miller from Perks of Being a Wallflower. I'm in love with him. I don't remember his name. Gabriel? Was it Gabriel? Was it
I don't know, man. I got.
You're talking about the blonde guy who was talking about. I have the cast list right here. I'm pretty sure it was. Why are they not showing him? I don't think they're showing him. Simon. There we go. Yeah, played by Fred. Shinger. His first name's Fred.
Yeah. Fred, or Simon, was just such a lovely boy. He deserved the world. Just everything. He was 100% here for it, too. He was like, this is what we got to do, guys. Stay alert. Be on your toes. Be careful. Like, we're going to get through this. We're going to get out of here. It's going to be all right.
Yeah, he's so cool. He's like the only guy that I've ever seen in anything recently that's just cool enough to be hanging out in the female's bathroom. Like, no one has an issue with it. He's just there.
Everyone's like, it's Simon. It's Simon gets a pass. It's okay.
It's just no one even questions it.
Well, I mean, Dina does question it, but like the other female in the room, she's just like, yeah, whatever. He's my friend.
Yeah.
Kate, I think.
Kate, yes, the drug pusher.
Yeah.
Who like turned out
to out of this town.
An awesome person, but made probably the most sense. She was like, I'm a kid from a small town. First of all, I'm just going to do drugs anyway. But also, like, I'm trying to get to college. I'm trying to, like, submit my stuff on time. Like, I have a whole life to live. And if drugs are the way to do it, then drugs are the way to do it. Period.
I can't fault that.
She also pulls, like, a Cindy, though, in that she's like, I have to maintain this image. Like, yeah, I'm pushing drugs. And it's kind of an under-the-table, like, unspoken secret. Everyone knows that I am who I am and I do what I do, but no one talks about it. So I get to maintain this awesome image as opposed to not dangerous liaisons, Cruel Intentions, where the whole thing is that no one knows about the facade Sarah Michelle Gellar's putting on except for her brother. Like it's a very, I liked the way they did Kate's character. That was cool.
And I weirdly related to Josh so much.
That's the brother, right?
Yeah, that's the brother, and like his awkwardness and like how like solitary he is, very much to himself, and then that like kind of like first ever relationship that he ends up having with Kate. Yeah.
Is there something you want to talk about? Do you spend your off hours going on murder forums?
Murder forums, no, but you know me, I do all that.
Possibly.
Nah, I'm more of like an experienced guy. I just learned by going out and doing it.
Oh, well, things to learn about a person in 2021. Amazing.
You see, 2021 sucks because everyone is inside. You can't find anybody. But yeah.
But so Ruby, I think Ruby Lane was actually my favorite killer, even though we didn't get like a ton of her.
Yes.
I love the weird, creepy, like lullaby thing that she had going on. She just had like a cool '80s look.
Very Amy Winehouse of her, but I was into it.
You know what? Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
It was the hairstyle and the eye makeup.
Mm.
She was like a slightly slimmer Amy Winehouse.
And I think, well, no, the big thing that do we see? So when they're at the hospital, right? When they're at the hospital and they get attacked again, and they see that it's actually Ryan Torres, who's the skull mask killer. That's before we're introduced to Ruby Lane, right?
I think that's
Yeah,
around.
it is. Yeah, it is. Because after that, they go to the police station, and then
Right,
Simon.
the police station.
Yeah, and then Simon walks
yeah.
on the street and sees her.
Yes, she crawls out of the freaking I don't know,
Manhole.
the manhole, the sewage pipe thing.
Okay, so the first indication that we're given that something supernatural is going on, because they talk about the curse, but it's like up until the point that we see Ryan Torres again after he was shot in the forehead, do we have any suspicion to believe that that was actually like a real thing?
Yeah.
And then we see Ruby get shot in the face, and she just heals.
And see, like, I didn't have the reaction to that as hard as maybe someone else would, because I was, as soon as we open talking about a curse, I take it for complete granted that a supernatural thing is going on. But I think someone who was maybe a little less averse in horror movies or was a little bit more skeptical
Would
just,
find that to be a genuine shock.
yeah, or even someone who just because we open with it maybe forgot that that was like a plot thing.
I didn't forget it, but the interesting thing to me is, so they mention a curse. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Because like watching the trailer and even just watching the movie up until that point, I'm like, this is essentially like a heavy slasher movie. And they're talking about Sarah Fear, like the killer or whatever, possessing people. But I'm like, yeah, man, I don't know if I, buy that. We haven't been given any indication to actually believe that's what's going on. It's just like a rumor going around. And then we see Ryan pop back up. I'm like, oh, okay, there's actually some supernatural stuff going on. And then Ruby just, completely and totally confirms that.
Yeah, yeah, I don't really remember what my in the moment reaction was beyond just, oh, so we can't just kill these guys.
Yep, they're screwed. They can't actually kill them.
That's quite inconvenient.
Yeah, see, I wasn't like surprised by the Ruby Lane thing, but I was like, oh, now see, here are the stakes that we're operating with, and we are severely outmatched. We're in trouble.
And I mean, then they blow them up, and that doesn't work.
That does not work.
Oh, that was so cool. That was very fun.
See, if I'm dealing with like a Wolverine or someone who regenerates from practically nothing, I'm taking a glass jar, I'm gonna put them in the jar while they're in slime mode and leave them there.
Honestly,
they were regrowing pretty fast. I don't know if you'd have the time to do that.
you could at least put some of them in there.
Yeah, he comes back without a hand to use as an axe.
Right.
To grab an axe.
Or more likely, there'd then be two of them, like the worms thing that worms don't actually do, but like you split them in half and then you've got two.
No, but like, can we talk about the fact that this movie goes from like 0 to 100 and then from 100 to 150? Because because it's really one thing to the next thing. As soon as we figure out the stakes, they're blowing people up. People are getting put through like bread slicers. They have the whole mini psychological Walking Dead thing going on where they're like all stuck in the classroom and they're like, oh my god, we finally realized what they're after. Someone has to go. Someone winds up sacrificing themselves to die. They wind up doing the thing with the blood.
The thing where
this is just so much.
The thing where you can stop the curse if you die and then come back is a really clever plot point.
Yeah.
And
that's really you're playing with fire because there's no guarantee you could bring anyone back. This girl took
Sam had to OD and then get drowned.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe that was what I thought. Maybe,
and she made it out of that. I really would have thought this girl would have just been. She's done.
Yeah, maybe that's where I had my slight suspension of disbelief breakage moment, where I'm like,
Well, 'cause she
Okay,
comes back to life, but she comes back to life possessed by freaking Sarah Fear. So maybe that's why.
but there's like the scene in between that where she
Where
seems
she's
normal.
okay. Yeah.
It's like, well,
Well,
damn.
to be
I guess.
fair, she didn't really seem normal in that scene to me. She seemed like right after she like they kind of have her coughing up the water and whatever. She's like, I really
mean, with
thought
her and
that,
her
like,
mom.
is that after
Her mom picks her up and she seems like totally okay.
her mom from the police station?
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's like the next morning.
I like true, but she does seem like she's kind of out of it. Like, you know, like those coma patients that come out of a coma but then die the day later. Like she looks
Yeah,
like
I don't
okay,
know about that.
but she doesn't look like she's doing great.
I don't know about
I
that.
think that could be because of all the pills she was trying to take and then
Yeah.
dying and then being pumped with like 9 shots of adrenaline.
So much. So much. Like honestly, I could not say comfortably that she shows back up on screen looking fine. But
Yes.
she's looking better.
That's fair.
No, she vomits and looks about as ugly as she looks in the entire series. Well, I mean, except for being possessed, because she's stuck looking ugly for pretty much the entire time she's possessed.
Which, I mean, possession will do that to you.
It's true. That is true.
Give you rotten teeth, the whole deal.
Ugh.
Like gaunt cheekbones.
Mm-hmm. Bags under your eyes so deep they turn blue. Like ain't nobody trying to do all of that. You look like you haven't slept in 1,000 years and you're 16.
Which, I mean, as usually needs to be said for horror movies and doesn't get said, kudos to the makeup artists.
Yes. Yes.
And I have seen like a lot of praise for this movie on Twitter, especially just for putting a lesbian couple at the forefront of it.
Oh, that could also be another reason why Sam does not wind up dying. We don't want the kill your gays happening.
that would be a whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes more sense that she would have just died, to be quite honest. But yeah, I get it.
I mean, like, as far out as that whole situation is, I buy Sam coming back way more than I buy Sadie coming back after getting directly stabbed in the abdomen like 4 or 5 different times. And then getting brought back with CPR versus adrenaline and CPR.
I agree with you on that.
All right, let's
I
go.
concede that.
Let's go with what you said. Let's go with it's the magic. It's
that does make sense.
Yeah.
Like retroactively, that does make sense. But yeah, I think we're all pretty much in agreement that this was a solid horror trilogy, and
yeah, I'm looking forward
the story
to
was great.
I'm looking forward to the prospect of more of these, and I would not have expected to say that going into it. So yeah,
Brianna, it was great to have you on the show. I'm assuming you're gonna leave. Even I don't know if you have seen Suicide Squad yet or not. Or
I have. I saw it with Nick, and it, very well made movie. Not one that I would like to watch twice or really engage that much in, though.
Okay.
So yes, transitioning into the other big R-rated thing that we're going to be discussing. We've both watched Suicide Squad. How many times have you seen it?
I have now seen it 3 times.
Same. So I watched it once in theaters and have now seen it twice on HBO Max. So I don't know, man. I suppose
it came out while I was out to sea. I am livid that I did not get to see this in the theater when I saw the terrible first one in the theater.
Yeah, I knew because when I saw the reaction to this movie and I figured that I was going to like it, I was like, man, I spent money on a theater ticket for the first one. It's not fair if I don't do the same for this one. And unfortunately, releasing in the middle of an ongoing global pandemic was not to this movie's advantage financially because it's not doing too hot money-wise. But everyone who has seen it, at least most people, seem to be unanimously agreed that it's freaking awesome. And I, unsurprisingly, am also in that camp.
So am I. And you know what's cool? Warner Brothers seems to not even mind that. Like, they're losing money on this film, but they seem to be okay with that because of how well well, first of all, just because how well the movie turned out. Like it's a great movie and people
Yeah, like
like it.
to the point that they are offering James Gunn another gig, and like you hear rumors swirling around that it might be Justice League, what they might end up giving him. And like, man, whatever that dude wants to do for any company, for any property, just let him do it.
So he is more than proven. He should just be given a ball that he can go in and run with.
Hmm. But so I don't know. Let's sort of you the way we usually do, open with sort of your expectations going in. How'd you feel after the first time in particular, and where do you stand with it right now?
Well, um, like this is a movie that just gets stronger and stronger with every viewing. And it was already pretty damn great on first viewing. I would say, well, it's James Gunn. He directed the first two Guardians films. I like the first one a lot. The second one, nowhere near as much, but it's solid. And I was just expecting something genuinely good and better than that first movie, which isn't really saying much. Like we could all sit here and say, like, yeah, it's better than the first movie, but that's literally that's like saying little to nothing. Like that movie's terrible. Um, I was just excited to see him tackle the Suicide Squad, do it right, and present mostly characters that we had not yet seen before. The only bankable IP character that they really have in this is Harley.
Yeah, and I feel like I've witnessed a kind of weird anomalous transition happen where Harley Quinn was definitely a recognizable, bankable character before these movies started, not nearly to the extent of like the big three or something, but to now be in this place between this and Birds of Prey, and even the first Suicide Squad, with her being one of the few things people really liked about that movie, we're kind of in this place where Harley Quinn, as played by Margot Robbie, has become the face of live action DC movies, and I kind of can't believe that's where we are right now.
Yeah, like they were in this place where it feels like that character is way more popular than the big three.
Yeah, just because she's lucked out and been like one of the few characters who's appeared in more than one movie and been praised and like gotten good material across those movies. Which I mean, yeah, counting Zack Snyder's Justice League is not necessarily true, but that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, I went into this movie expecting to love it, and I actually had kind of an interesting thing because I'm sort of opposite to you on the Guardians movies. I like Volume 2 more than the first. And I had an interesting sort of like arc where I also totally agree that this movie only gets better and better on repeat viewings. And I'm glad for that because the first time I saw it, I thought it was a great movie, but I couldn't help but feel like it suffered from how much of it was in the marketing, and that was kind of something that stuck in my craw and was kind of bugging me as I left. And as I was thinking about it, it's like, wow, I feel like there's parts of this movie that would have landed way better had they not been in trailers and stuff. And I feel like that's a surprisingly large amount of the movie. And then I watched it a second and third time, and I did not have that problem at all. It's just I was just paying attention to the story and what was being done with the characters and the action and the themes, and it was all just so good. It's such a like tight movie, and this I think is an apt comparison because yesterday I watched this movie with Eden and both of our parents, and we sort of did it as a double feature with Birds of Prey. And it was really interesting to me how unanimously, like amongst the four of us, it seemed like Birds of Prey was the movie that felt looser and wasn't paced quite as well. despite that being a shorter movie than this one by almost an hour. And yet, when it came to Suicide Squad or The Suicide Squad, it's I'm not going to say that it doesn't feel its length, but it feels so like tight and well paced, and like everything is really well thought out structurally. Birds of Prey, I think, is a really structurally messy movie, but this one didn't have that problem at all.
Absolutely. It feels like Deadpool, but nowhere near as well thought out. And you know
Birds of Prey, yeah.
the fourth wall breaking, and well, I say fourth wall breaking. Narration is more accurate,
Yeah,
but
narration is like really bothered me the second time I saw that movie. And the whole like flashback, jumping back and forth in time structure, I don't think is to its advantage.
no, but this movie also does that. Like
It
the eight
doesn't go
minutes.
overboard with it.
No, it doesn't go overboard with it. And it handles it great. And we'll talk about that scene when we get there. But yeah, after watching this movie a good 3 times, I'm at a place now where I say this. I'm gonna say it. This is not only James Gunn's best movie. This is the best DC movie we've had since The Dark Knight.
Okay, so listen.
I feel that strongly about it.
The best DC movie since The Dark Knight has been like thrown around so much, like consistently enough that it's become a cliche. Like, and I'm sure that when people say that, they aren't like exaggerating and like they're just being true to their own opinion. But you would hear it be said all the time. I'd hear it be said for Wonder Woman. I'd hear it be said for Aquaman. I'd hear it be said for Shazam. And I
really don't understand that.
I even when we've had a movie prior to this one that I really loved, and it was in fact the one that I thought was the best since The Dark Knight, I would deliberately avoid using that specific turn of phrase because I just felt like it's one of those things that's been used so much, it's kind of lost all meaning. But I gotta say it here because it's just this is I really do feel like it applies here. This is the best one since then. It's the best DC movie in over a decade, and it it's hilarious to me that we got this movie because of a couple of tweets from like years and years ago. That's hilarious, but man,
But I've also never been like so happy for a director.
yeah.
He went through that whole ordeal, came out the other end, got to make this movie, and then Marvel rehired him and he got to do Guardians 3 anyway.
Yeah. And like this makes me only more excited for Guardians 3 because on the one hand, and I do think there's an element of truth to people who are like, this movie uh, gets to sort of have the amount of creative voice it does because it's James Gunn not being kind of like quote unquote handcuffed by a PG-13 and not being sort of like slave to Disney. But James Gunn himself has been very vocal about the fact that he tells the stories with the characters to the rating that he thinks that story warrants, and he would not, given the option, make an R-rated Guardians of the Galaxy because
it just doesn't fit those characters.
Yeah, and so I get excited for Guardians 3 even more so because this also feels to me as just like I'm witnessing his growth as a filmmaker. And like I'm really torn between whether I prefer this to Guardians 2, but on a lot of levels I can see like the progression from Guardians to Guardians 2 to this, and it feels like I'm watching someone get better at and perfect their craft as a filmmaker. And I'm like, man, I cannot wait to see what he does for the next one.
And this felt like really sharp comic book storytelling done as a film. And with the visual title cards, that represented like chapters of the movie, I thought that was really creative and really fun.
Yeah, a fun little thought exercise that I always like to do for a comic book movie is to like imagine how I would section it out into issues if it were like a comic arc. and this one basically does it for me. And I'm just like, yeah, that fits pretty perfectly. Like no chapter feels like it's overstaying its welcome. Like it all feels perfectly spaced out. And like so, man, there's so many like angles to approach this movie from. I guess I want to start on the performances, and part of that is like, look, okay, disclaimer: if you're a fan of the original Suicide Squad movie, because I do know that those exist, whether or not the narrative has been changed around that movie after David Ayer has given his own 2 cents, and we found out just how much of a studio like hack job that really was.
And that's
Which
not really a secret. Like you can tell just by watching that movie that it is.
Yeah, but I know that prior to David Ayer making like a public statement about it, there were still people who were like, "Well, I like David Ayer, so I'm going to take up for that movie," and then they just stopped. But like, there are people out there who sit down with that movie and they enjoy it and they're entitled to that. But be warned that I don't think I'm going to be able to stop myself from ragging on that movie as I talk about this one, because they do so many similar things, and this one is like the textbook example of how to do that better. And part of that is in the performances, because I don't think that even with the version that David Ayer had wanted to make, just based on like pages of script that have come out and stuff, I don't think like the characterization of Rick Flag or Amanda Waller or Harley in that movie was going to hold a candle to this one, because you can see in Joel Kinnaman's performance and Viola Davis's performance and in Margot Robbie's performance just how much better served they are by this material.
Joel Kinnaman especially. When I
Yeah.
saw that first Suicide Squad movie, I was convinced he was a bad actor, but that was just a terrible, terrible script, or at least it was hacked to pieces based on however much interference Warner Brothers ended up having with that film. But
Yeah. And you'd
I then
also see reactions from people on Twitter as to like, he looks so much more pleasing to the eye in this movie because like the hair and costuming are better.
but I then got to see him in the first season of Altered Carbon, and he crushed it. It's a very different role to really either of the two versions of Rick Flag that he played in both the first movie and this, but he was so good in that show. I was like, this guy can act. This guy can absolutely act. Um, and then like he's given a much lighter version here, and he makes great use of it.
Yeah, and like it's because we do go not like long stretches, but there's stretches of this movie where he's not there, and yet for the amount of time that we spend with him, you're really endeared to him. And it's like Harley had been in previous movies and had the chance to like endear herself to audiences. Captain Boomerang, who was very briefly in this one, even again in Suicide Squad, you would often see people go like, "Wow, I was surprised by how much I like Jai Courtney." Like you were saying, nobody had that opinion about Joel Kinnaman coming out of the first movie, so that this movie endears you to him so quickly and so hard is a real testament, I think.
Um, One of the things, because I got to talk about my first viewing, one of the things that worried me initially about this opening was that I'm also like, I have the movie muted and I'm watching it as we're discussing it, kind of like a commentary.
Yeah.
Uh, so one of the things that worried me um, about the opening when I first saw it was that, okay, we did so much killing of all these nobody Suicide Squad members for this intro. Is it just a more flashy version of that first movie where we kill a bunch of people to show you there are stakes, but nobody else dies for the rest of the film, or we have one token death? That's what that concern was lingering in the back of my head. And then we not only have a really impactful and strong death for Rick Flag, but we also kill Polka Dot Man.
I was so sad. I liked him so much, but like,
so disrespectful and unceremonious too.
and like, there are people who don't care for it as a scene for that reason, and I understand that. But I think Polka Dot Man's death might actually be my favorite scene in the movie, specifically because I feel like it's very intentional with creating like an emotional dissonance. Like, here's a character that we're invested in, and he gets killed really unceremoniously, and it's almost a joke, but at the same time, it feels kind of appropriate, and I feel bad that he's gone, but I also feel happy for him that he died with a smile on his face and he dies at his happiest. And it's like it's this very strange emotional miasma for such a quick moment to create, and I really like that.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't go as far as calling it my favorite scene in the film, but it was, I think, still a pretty strong choice because we'd already had the big, strong, emotionally impactful death with Rick Flag.
Yeah, and I mean we do get a moment of Ratcatcher too mourning him in death, and so we do pay the character a bit of respect in that regard. But in the moment, it's like it's also a matter of we're in the middle of an action scene, so we've kind of got to skirt past it for a bit.
I also really appreciate John Cena's performance in that scene.
Yeah,
He
James
looks gut
Gunn.
wrenched. He looks gut wrenched and heartbroken that he even had to do it. That it escalated that far.
Yeah, and like I'm really interested to see where we ultimately take his character in his show, because I was like, okay, of all the characters to give a show, I'm surprised that we chose this one. But now I'm like, no, he's of all the characters who end this movie alive, he's the one who's in the most interesting emotional place. So let's follow this guy's story.
Yeah, I think they totally earned that. Like Peacemaker makes sense to give his own show coming out of this film. I really believe that.
But yeah, I love this cast so much that like I really don't know if I could pick a favorite even if you twisted my arm, because everyone is just so endearing. And if they're not endearing, like Peter Capaldi as the Thinker, then that's still just a really like impactful character for just how much of a complete monster he is. And Peter Capaldi never half-asses it. He's always like at a 10 in terms of just commitment to the performance in anything he's in. And again, Thinker's a comparatively small role. Like he's important to the plot, but he's not in a lot of the movie. But Peter Capaldi just knows how to sell every line and like every expression to make you hate this guy as much as possible.
Um, Margot is also very very strong here as Harley Quinn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they I think they finally like nailed her aesthetically.
Yes,
She doesn't have too much going on with the costume. The one she wears for the first bit of the film, James Gunn said was very inspired by the Arkham games.
that's my
And
favorite costume she's had in any of these movies.
oh yeah, mine too. And I love the red dress.
Mm-hmm. And I personally like the going back to the black and red for the hair. I never quite vibed with the blue and pink.
I didn't either. Um, the so her whole like kind of tangent, well not really tangent, but like side little part going on in the movie
Mm-hmm.
with that not diplomat, but
The President Luna.
yeah, obviously on first viewing I'm like, why is this important? And then she shoots him and I'm like, oh my god. She shoots him and then goes into the whole diatribe of like, if I ever met a guy with some red flags, I'd do the sensible thing. I promised myself I'd do the sensible thing and murder him. I'm like, this is so Harley Quinn.
And I love that whole scene and that whole speech, which according to James Gunn is the first thing that he wrote for this movie. Like he had that whole speech just written for some Harley Quinn story if he ever ended up doing it, and then got the chance to do this movie and wrote the rest of this movie. I'm like, it's such a it's such a great moment for Robbie's performance, and it's a great moment for the character of like juggling this thing where Harley is the sympathetic one, but also she's very obviously unhinged. But also, like, you're proud of her for having grown as a character and not having like those dependency issues. But also, it's like when we get to the end of that speech, and she's like, uh, "You're real pretty and all, but honestly, I think you look pretty. I think you look prettier like this, with all those rotten thoughts gone from your head." It's like that is like real, like impactful, like yandere stuff. And it's like, that's it's such a good, like, that whole speech is just such a good encapsulation of this character and the ways that she's like entertaining and sympathetic, but also kind of scary.
Yeah, she's weirdly like she is kind of deranged, but not crazy. And like in a very what I like about Harley is that like everyone says she's just as crazy as Joker, but I really don't think she is. She a lot of it for her in like the way she acts psychologically is coping with trauma, and that's a lot of what her stance on shooting him is. It's
Yeah,
because like the bad guys they don't just leave you quietly. They slash your tires and murder your dog and all this, and it's like
and like
this.
they say the kind of music you like isn't real music at all. Which, I mean, again, on the one hand, that's funny, but on the other hand, that's like a genuine thing that emotionally abusive people will do. And it's like it's this great balancing act where it's Harley Quinn being entertaining and surprising, so like we laugh, but also it's one of the few moments where she's crazy and not like in a cute way.
No, in just a very somber and kind of unsettling way that really dials you into who she is as a person.
Mm.
And I thought that was great. Ratcatcher 2 um, was probably the most surprisingly satisfying oddball choice in the entire film.
Yeah, if I'd known like that we were gonna split the cast basically between the nobodies at the start who die and the rest who get to like be in the movie, I would have assumed like at first glance Ratcatcher would be at the nobodies, because just like I have zero familiarity with that character. But then she's basically the heart of the movie and she's super endearing and ends up being the most useful.
And I could not, James Gunn, you mad genius. We're gonna give the Justice League's first ever like real villain, Starro. We're gonna make that like the main third act fight of the film, and then we're gonna kill him by having Harley Quinn poke a hole in his eye and rats eat his eyeball from the inside out.
Just the way that this movie just has zero qualms whatsoever with taking the most oddball concepts and just being like, yeah, we can do something cool with this, and then just does it. But I'm also just so happy that we have a character in this movie called Ratcatcher 2. Like, that's such a thing that you would see in a comic, but never in anything else. So it's like, I am this character, 2. And they just say it in the dialogue constantly.
Yeah, and this again going back to the comic thing. Uh, this more so than a lot of other comic book films just feels like a comic book come to life because of how he structured the story.
Yeah.
There was something else I want to mention with Ratcatcher. I like that we don't spend too much time in flashback territory with her.
I really like the way we did that with the reflection on the window.
Yeah,
Because it's great because we do need, or at least we want the visual, but we also still want to capture that performance from her as an
And we
adult.
don't want to stop the momentum of the movie.
Mm-hmm. So like to just have her describe it so it is, you know, like expositional, but we get the visual accompaniment and we get to see her face as she delivers that monologue. That's just such a good choice.
Um, look, we all know that Bloodsport would be Deadshot if there was no first movie.
Oh yeah, basically.
But
Although,
essentially, just go ahead.
you know, I'm trying to think, like to the degree of like, do I think Will Smith could give this performance? And I really don't think so. Like Will Smith, I'm not gonna knock him as an actor, but he's one of those guys who I would say has a fairly limited range. And part of the issue with him as Deadshot was already that
It's just him. Like,
like
he,
Deadshot as written is is kind of a character that's you know, he's a bit more of a hard ass and he's supposed to be a little bit more serious, and it feels like Will Smith kind of has to inject Will Smith into him, and so when we get those like Will Smith isms, it feels kind of out of place, and I feel like that would feel even worse in this movie with the character that we've got going on with Bloodsport.
yeah, I don't think you're wrong about that. I think that they wanted a bankable star, a really likable bankable star in that role until they went with Will Smith. But he's not Deadshot.
Yeah. So like
And
Bloodsport
okay.
here is kind of like you could say like that is closer to Deadshot because it's not Will Smith.
But I also don't know comic book Bloodsport or how similar he actually is to Deadshot. But for all intents and purposes, he is the Deadshot of this movie.
Yeah. But I really like what Idris Elba does here. I like that he's not exclusively the straight man. Like of the group that we have, he is for the most part the most sensible, and obviously he's the one who's like, I really don't want to be here. I'm here out of obligation. But there is still an element of he's not a crazy person, but there's bits of like he is a bit of an oddball personality also. He's not a completely normal grounded guy either.
Um, yeah, so it's interesting looking at this version of King Shark because um we also have the version from the Flash, which is, I kind of technically more comic book accurate, at least to what little Suicide Squad comics that I've read. But we also have my favorite version, which is the one from the Harley Quinn animated show.
Yeah, who this one takes after a lot visually, but definitely not personality wise.
Yeah, he's not like infantile.
Which, you know, King Shark at this point seems to be one of those characters who's like, he is completely different from medium to medium, and I'm just kind of more than okay with that. Like
Yeah, I
this,
really dig that as a
yeah, like
choice.
this. I don't think this is going to be one of those characters where we have like a definitive take on him. He's just different in whatever whoever wants to use him a certain way.
Yeah, I really like that. That's how it's turned out. Um, the only character that's used as a Suicide Squad member in this movie that I don't really think has any business being in this movie is Weasel.
That's interesting. Expand on that.
Okay, so for all intents and purposes, in this movie, Weasel is just a humanoid animal. He's not actually a sentient being that went and broke laws, and so Waller just snatched him up and he was, coerced or bullied into agreeing to being on the squad. Like, for all intents and purposes, he's an animal. Like, he doesn't have even, King Shark's level of sentience. He's just a thing. That's the equivalent of just putting a random animal on the squad, which they've never done and wouldn't make any sense. Um, like I think everyone on the squad needs to be, like a sentient person. Um, but Weasel is, for all intents and purposes, just an animal, and he's just there to, be funny and look weird and kind of put the audience off kilter, but also make them laugh. Like, I get that you want to do that, but I think, everyone on the squad should still, make sense on the squad. There is a character by the name of Weasel in the comics, but he's actually a person that dresses as a weasel, I guess.
Mm.
Um, but in this movie, they just made him like a humanoid animal.
I
That's literally the only negative thing I could throw at this movie.
and like I totally understand having that issue just from the perspective of like it really doesn't make sense from a decision making standpoint from like Waller to have him here. But I like the fact that he's here for that reason because okay, again, this is another one of those twofold things. On one hand, I think this movie is doing something really interesting that I can't perfectly articulate with the way that it treats animals in general. And that includes Weasel, and that includes King Shark, and that kind of includes Starro, and the way that other characters treat animals in this movie and react to animals, and like that goes with the way that we kill all the birds in this movie, with the way we have Ratcatcher and Bloodsport and his rat phobia, and the way we end the movie on that shot with the rat. And I think there's something to the idea that King Shark spends this whole movie as like he is sentient, you're correct, but I think it's a question whether or not he's really a moral agent the way that the other more intelligent characters are. Like he's not just an animal, but there is a degree to which it's like he's his thinking is simple-minded enough that he might as well be. Like he doesn't really think, even though he speaks, and like we can tell verbally that he's forming friendships and like through his actions, he doesn't really seem to think in a way that's more complicated than an animal would think. And like I just think it's interesting the way that we have characters getting attached to him versus Weasel, who is the first character to quote unquote die because of how little it seems like anyone cared. Like Savant picks him up from the water, but he doesn't bother to actually check or do CPR on him. Nobody checked if he could swim in the first place. Nobody on the squad is really sure what his deal is. People are barely even sure what he is. I feel like that's very deliberate. And that brings me to like the second point, which is part of what I like about the the opening sequence. And this is something that I wouldn't have even picked up on, I don't think, if I hadn't had a discussion about it with Arthur Chu on Twitter, is that we set up a lot of characters in that opening sequences to be foils to the characters that we're actually going to follow. And part of that is Weasel and King Shark. Part of that is Blackguard as like the complete polar opposite on the spectrum to Ratcatcher. And there's a point to be made with that about how one of these people is like a criminal, yes, but they're not remotely a bad person. Of all the characters in this movie, Ratcatcher is the one who's not at all a villain. Like she committed crimes, but she's a good person. And Blackguard, by contrast, is the only character out of either of the teams who has zero redeeming qualities. He's nothing but a bad person. He's complete garbage. He is a villain with a capital B, like no goodness in him at all. And he's again the first person to actually die. He's the real first person that we cut out of this movie. Then you have Savant and Bloodsport, Michael Rooker's character versus Idris Elba, and like those two are the guys that we sort of use as the audience's POV characters, and they react to similar situations in pretty much the exact opposite ways. I just think that whole I don't know, so like 11 minutes, 11 opening minutes, I think, is setting up a lot of interesting things, and it's really cleverly written. So it's not just, oh, we introduced these characters so that we could kill them off to introduce the stakes. It's also using characters as foils to other characters so that we can inform the people that we actually care about and are following.
Yeah, I think you're definitely onto something with that.
Yeah, so those are just two things that I thought about re the whole weasel thing. But I'm trying to think of is if there's anything else specifically about the opening bit. Killing off Captain Boomerang is something that I thought was interesting because again, it doesn't just set up that these people could die; it sets up that even people who were in the previous movie could die. We are not going to be beholden to any sort of status quo of like, all right, audiences are familiar with this guy, so we got to keep him around. And it's also good to have someone who Harley cares about and has a rapport with be among the people that die because let's assume that you didn't watch Suicide Squad or Birds of Prey. That's a very quick, efficient way to humanize Harley's character as someone that we are meant to care about going forward for the rest of the movie. I just think that's a really smart, just really smart written intro sequence.
So do I. I think like killing off Boomerang was a strong choice for that very reason. Is because Harley had an attachment to him.
Mm-hmm. And let me see what else I got here in notes because there's so much to talk about with this movie. I already touched on how much I liked Peter Capaldi. Uh, we talked about Polka Dot Man, but David Dastmalchian, his performance, I think, is also really good. He does a good job selling Polka Dot Man as this guy who's like, he is really, really depressed, but it's not to the extent that he can't, function. Like he feels, he doesn't feel one note in being like the sad sack of the bunch.
Um, I do want to talk about how this movie is shot and how it looks. So I watched a little behind the scenes featurette a few weeks ago.
Mm.
Um, and it was James Gunn talking about how they developed this new like revolutionary camera.
Yeah,
Um,
I saw that. Yeah,
like they're able to tilt it around, and you can it definitely shows in like the action sequences and even just some scenes where characters are just walking around and talking, like the camera's always moving. It's just a really cool subtle thing that keeps you engaged the entire time.
yeah.
Um, and also his action scene with Harley, uh, definitely, uh, well, I don't know, because some of the action in Birds of Prey with her is actually really good, but I don't know. I think this might be her best action scene, the one with her and with the pole and the flowers and everything, and
I'm
that was like
torn. I'm torn between that and the uh, the prison fight in Birds of Prey.
the prison fight was really well executed. I will give them that
I
because
think,
they and I read about how they had the director of John Wick 3 come in and shoot that scene for them.
yeah, yeah. And like I'm slightly torn because like I mentioned with the Birds of Prey pacing thing, that's an action sequence that's split in half and the halves are separated by 20 minutes. So that's kind of weird. But like once that scene gets into the swing of things, I'm really not sure between that and the one in this movie, which I prefer. All I know is that the lesson should be learned by now not to try and imprison Harley Quinn, or don't let her into a prison, because that's not going to end well for the guards, for the other inmates, or anybody. But yeah, I think
Because
that's
the
a
movie
really
does
strong
take place
emphasis.
in Corto Maltese, um, I thought the music choice for that scene was really inspired.
The I Ain't Got Nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that also. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Tell you what I love. I loved Milton. I love that
Oh,
we
the
get.
whole Milton thing. Yeah, that was great.
I love that it seems like every scene that Milton is present for, it's like it's deliberately shot so he's just out of like the audience's focus. Like he's constantly present in scenes and in shots, but he's always just off to the side, or he's like just in the crowd so you don't quite register that he's there, but you're like, yeah, Milton's here, whatever. And then he dies, and it's like half the audience I expect is also being like, yeah, wait a minute, why was Milton still here? Man should have stayed with the bus.
Maybe, yeah, but um, I weirdly didn't have that. I knew Milton was with them. I just thought it was slightly odd that he wasn't like talking to them as much as I thought he, would have given this whole ordeal. Like, okay, so where are we going, and why are you guys doing this and that? And
Yeah, like you get the sense that like he works for Solsoria, so he's just doing whatever she says. But
yeah,
it's so funny that just like he's so quiet and he's so off to the side. And like the bit where they're all in the bus and they're all like getting geared up, and Milton has like a shotgun or something, and without even looking at him, Rick Flag just takes it and he's like, "Nope."
I'll take that.
Yeah. But yeah, um, I can already imagine that you don't have this problem, but I know somebody who suggested that they had a bit of an issue with the idea that the movie doesn't really have a villain because Starro shows up so late and he isn't really like a villain, and the two presidents, like the alternate presidents for Corto Maltese, aren't really like the bad
For all
guys.
intents and purposes, the villain is just the goal. Waller sends them on a mission, and the goal is to stop erase all evidence of Project Starfish. That is the goal.
I think it's kind of neat that it's like a villainless movie almost. But if you were to like twist my arm and say who's the villain of the piece, I would actually say it is Waller
So would
because
I.
yeah, because she just is puppeteering so much of this, and so much of this is, if not her fault directly, it's the people that she's representing, like who okayed all of this to go down in the first place.
Okay,
And
so
like
I
the
have a
two,
question.
hmm?
I have a question, and I want to see how you feel about this because uh, I said the weasel thing's my only main issue. Um, I mean, this really isn't an issue so much. It's just a thing that's kind of nagging at me, you know?
Hmm?
So, towards the climax, when everyone kind of, storms off to try to stop Starro anyway, even though their mission's over,
Oh,
and
I know what
Amanda,
you're gonna say.
and Amanda Waller doesn't want them to go through with it and is threatening to, blow their bombs if they go and try to help. Um, they all just keep walking and ignore her and don't say anything. And I'm thinking, why aren't you trying to reason with her? Because if you actually plan on trying to stop it, you're not going to be able to do it if you're dead. But none of them have any retort or response, or none of them are trying to reason with her. And then they just get lucky that there are people in the room with her and decide to knock her out so that they can help.
I don't think that any of them have reason to believe that Waller is reasonable. And like
No, but I also don't. They can't know that something's going to stop her, that she's going to change her mind.
they can't. I I think what I get from that scene is that they're fully aware that she can just kill them, but and this is again something that is an interesting parallel to the beginning, where the one thing that Savant does is run away, and this it's an interesting parallel that's like in opposite, because Savant sees all of this stuff going down. He sees his teammates dying, and he sees that he has two teammates, Harley and Rick, who are still alive. And instead of like, I guess you'd say like nutting up and trying to help his teammates, he goes to save his own skin. And like on one level, that's like lame of him to do, like bail on them when there are two people still alive who could use his help. But at the same time, this is a guy who was clearly not prepared for this. Why shouldn't he, even if on some level he knows that he's going to get his head blown off, why shouldn't he at least die on his own terms? If he wants to die in the act of trying to run away for his life, then that's debatably the most human thing he could do. And then you turn it around toward the end. These guys know that Waller is not going to listen to a word they say. So if she's going to kill them, at least let them die doing what they think is right, and let them die in the process of attempting to go and save these people. That's better than just listening to what Waller says or wasting their time trying to bargain with her and then she kills them anyway because why, like, to make an example out of them.
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting because of all the Suicide Squad comics that I read, which isn't really even a ton, the squad's never been in that position before, where like they all tried to defy her orders, and you know the thing about threats is you have to make good on them for people to take you seriously. So Waller, if she goes through with it, she has to kill them all and just find a whole new team.
Or, well, you would expect what she would do is like she would blow up one of them and be like, "See, I'm serious. Now the rest of you come back here for real."
Yeah, she'd start off with one, and then that would probably coerce the others into cooperating.
Yeah. I thought what you were going to say was the issue being like we don't see any of those office workers suffer any punishment for turning on her and going against her orders like that. But I
Um,
guess we'll see
I
the
assume,
repercussions of that in Peacemaker.
yeah, we'll see, because like I can't imagine. I feel like because that happened, if they make a sequel, James Gunn will have her like isolated by herself whenever she's running missions, so that no one can
Yeah,
just stop her.
yeah, I want to know if the lady who actually hit her with the club is like
Yeah,
killed off screen or something, because
because
I'd
we
be
don't see her again in that ending cutscene, do we? Yeah, we don't
yeah,
see her.
no. So I would be shocked if she's still alive after that or has that job at least. At
Hmm.
minimum, she had to be fired.
More than likely. But I don't know, because like everyone else was also comparable in that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeesh. But then that's true. But so how do you feel about the way that Starro was ultimately utilized? Because I thought
um,
it was freaking cool.
so did I. I was not expecting to like that whole climax nearly as much as I did. Um, and I just thought it was really creative and fun.
Yeah, and I like that this is the thing that a lot of people have been saying. I like that when we defeat him, we give him that moment of humanity where it's like I was happy up in space before I got dragged down here and then tortured for 30 years. And it's like, oh man, yeah, Sorrow's really a victim in all this. And like you gotta wonder to what degree Starro even understands the idea that like some human beings are innocent. Like, does it register for him that not all of humanity is culpable in what happened to him? Or does he just view everyone as like, it's your fault that I'm here? Humans brought me here, so screw all humans.
More than likely, because he doesn't have anything to base off of other than what he has experienced.
Yeah. And like, uh, I know some people don't necessarily care for the fact that in the comics, if Starro takes you over, you're still alive, but here, as soon as a star lands on you, you're dead. I get why we did that because, we got to have the squad fight them at the end, and we don't want them to be killing like innocent people
Innocent
who are just
people.
mind controlled.
Yeah, but I also think it adds to the darkness of this movie. It adds to the darkness of the experiments that Thinker has been doing on all these guys.
And further intensifies the stakes
Yeah,
because um, with them attached to dead bodies, there is like no saving them. They're just the starfishes are just like reanimating dead bodies. There is no, once you take out Starro, all those people are saved. They're still gone.
yeah. And which, I mean, I can see a version of this movie where that is the case, but I don't mind that that's not the version we have.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah. And like I think it's really interesting to see reactions to this movie from people who feel the way I do about it, which is that it gets very dark and it's full of characters who have a bit of a disregard for life, but the movie and the story as a whole ultimately skews very humanist and like it cares a lot about human life inherently and the value that a person has. And people who will react to this movie and be like, it's so mean spirited. The whole movie just has no care for human life and it doesn't treat life with any dignity. And I'm like, man, I just don't feel that.
Especially given the reason for this whole climax, they all choose going to preserve like millions of thousands of human lives over self-preservation.
Yeah.
They could have just walked away.
And like punctuating that with the bit from Ratcatcher 1 of like rats are the lowliest and most despised creatures. If they can have purpose, then so can we all. And like that's really the movie in a nutshell is, and I think the fact that we have these characters who are so violent and who kill so readily just feeds into that idea that the Suicide Squad are basically the rats, and on some level they are like the degree to which they consciously care about or disregard human lives is on their circumstances and the people that have informed their worldviews and who they're taking orders from. Like Waller obviously does not inherently care for life. She's always making like these calculations in her head as to like how many people is it okay to sacrifice. And like I'm fully of the school of thought that's like she she sends uh Harley and Rick and Captain Boomerang with the first squad hoping that they die also. How do you feel about that idea? Like she was banking on Rick Flag and Harley also dying along with everyone else in that distraction.
Um, that if we're taking the first, if we're taking the first movie into account, which I have a tough time even deciding if it's even fair to do that. But that I don't know if I want to say that feels like something Amanda Waller wouldn't do because she is the epitome of ruthless characters in comics. Like she'll have like a cheeky back and forth with Flag and other characters like him in the comics. But she does not actually care about anybody.
Yeah, and that's like why I bring this up in relation to the broader theme because like the idea, and again, this was something that was in the discussion Arthur Chu and I had, is that Amanda Waller would prefer that the Suicide Squad be a team that has no veterans because the longer that individuals work on the same team, the longer that one, they'll be able to acclimate to like Waller's methods and like see through her. And two, the more likely they are to develop connections with each other. And that is again another thing that makes the fact that we kill off Captain Boomerang and we get that reaction from Harley so telling. Is like Amanda Waller would prefer that these guys don't care about each other at all. And the sooner she can get them dead, the sooner she doesn't have to worry about any of them growing any attachments.
But that's also a double-edged sword because you know people who don't care about each other are not inclined to work well together on a team.
Yeah, but for her purposes, like they're all just tools, and they'll do what she says and hopefully get the job done. And so we get to again near the climax with Peacemaker. He is doing exactly what Waller wants, and what ultimately stops Waller's plans from working out the way she wants them to is the fact that Bloodsport cares about Ratcatcher, and he sees what's going on there, and without any context, he decides to kill Peacemaker to save Ratcatcher, and that's what throws a wrench in everything, and is ultimately what lets the four of them, King Shark, Ratcatcher, Bloodsport, and Harley, get away with their lives at the end, because Bloodsport is able to make that deal. So, like, this movie, I think, is doing a really interesting thing where it is about a lot of people who don't care about other people until they do, and then that's the people who are actually able to make it out of the movie with some sense of victory.
I love that the Suicide Squad, of all things, has gotten more time to shine and has now essentially become another mainstream franchise. Uh, because up until this movie, we only had two good Suicide Squad films, and they were both animated. And that's Batman Assault on Arkham and Suicide Squad Hell to Pay.
Yeah. And like I like this more than Hell to Pay, which is saying a lot because prior to seeing this movie, Hell to Pay was like my go-to for okay, that's how you do a Suicide Squad story, David Ayer. But yeah,
But now
between that and this is a really neat concept to have be such a mainstream thing.
and executed as well as I could have ever hoped.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that the actual mission is not very, bombastic or, heavy spectacle. And it's just in the outline of what their mission actually is, which it's just to destroy all trace of Project Starfish, which actually means not killing that thing.
It
But
means like wiping the hard drive.
their mission is to essentially take a hard drive so that the information that the U.S. government was involved doesn't get out to the public. That's their job. Their job isn't to kill that thing.
Well, I don't think that's true because Waller does say destroy every trace of the project, and when they
But
come
then
in,
when it bursts out, she's like, "No, don't stop it."
yeah, but I think that's just the circumstances have changed. Like using Starro as a weapon was never like Waller's plan, but then once it gets out, she's like, just leave it.
That's interesting.
Because there's that bit where they go into the lab and Thinker goes up to Starro and he's like, I'm afraid they're here to kill you. Nothing I can do about it. And no one objects to that. So I do think
Yeah, you're right. They were actually supposed to kill it, but it was going to be chained up for them. There wasn't supposed to be like an all-out battle that they would have had to go through.
So like at one point, killing Starro was the plan, but then they didn't do that, and then it gets out, and Waller's just like, well, you know what? This is fine. Just leave it.
Yeah, it's not our problem. We just get the drive, and we'll go.
Yeah. Which I mean, hey, that's fitting. That's in character.
That is definitely in character for Amanda Waller.
But yeah, just I really love this movie. I love the way that it's spread out. Like I love that because again, I don't mean to keep bringing up Birds of Prey as like a point of comparison, but I've seen them both so close to each other. Birds of Prey, I think on paper does this neat thing where it's not overly concerned with action, and a lot of that movie is downtime and characters just kind of, going about their business without needing to devolve into a fight scene over everything. But the way it chooses to go about it means that when we do get action, it feels weirdly spread throughout the movie until we get to the third act. It's basically a giant action sequence. I'm like, okay, I guess we're an action movie now. But this movie has a healthy amount of action scenes, but it doesn't feel overwhelming. It doesn't feel like we're getting action at the expense of story and character stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I really like that.
I think we just about covered the gambit, man. This was everything I wanted to be, so much more.
Yeah,
And
I really have no complaints. I got no complaints with this movie.
yeah, I literally had two gripes that, I mean, I still kind of stand by the Weasel one, but other than that, like, there's not one tomato I could throw at this movie.
Yeah, like I get where you're coming from with the Weasel thing, just logistically. Like my argument is just that it makes sense that he's in this movie, but that it makes sense that
He
Waller.
doesn't make sense as a member of the Suicide Squad.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense that Waller would have him here. That's that I can agree with you on. But
But
yeah, man, I love this movie, and like I just want to reiterate because it's been said by people other than me, and like I've had my thing a couple of times. I'm like this is the DC movie that I like the most. Like really, take Shazam, the first Wonder Woman, Aquaman, like all of the ones that I've been pretty consistently really positive about. This one I think blows them all out of the water. This is the one with a bullet right now.
I feel the same way, and that about does it for us. This was our fourth episode of Stark Contrast. Um, I think inevitably, well, I don't really know if I want to. I mean, we'll do Shang-Chi. That will happen.
Mhm.
But I want to do the two Long Halloween Batman films, and I'm undecided
I
on
forgot that was two movies.
what the second topic will be.
Hmm. Yeah, it'll come to you. But
Yeah.
for now,
Or do you have any? Oh wait, I don't know if I can expect you to get all the way caught up on Superman and Lois by then, but would you be up for that?
yeah, if I am, then absolutely.
Okay, it's decided.
Nice.
That's
So
what we'll
for
tackle
now,
next time.
thanks everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed.